guys, my name is Jess and welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be talking about all of the books that I read in the month of June, so I call it my June wrap up. So if that's something that interests you, then keep on watching. So this month I was only able to get through 4 books that was on my TBR list. I think I had a total of 6 books, so unfortunately I wasn't able to get through all of them. Some of the books that I read this month were hits, some of them were not necessarily misses, but they weren't as good as what I thought that they were going to be. So they were a bit harder for me to get through, which ultimately led to me not being able to read as much. Also, I had family in town. Me and my family, we went on a little mini vacation. So just this month in general was not a good reading month for me. But I still wanted to share with you guys what I read and if I recommend the books or not. So let's go ahead and get started. So in May, I actually read a book called The Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. And I got it in my book of the month box and I really loved it. So I checked my local library and they actually had 2 of her other books that I had put on my Amazon wish list. So I was able to check those out from the library. So I got so excited because it's really rare that I find books that are on my wish list at the library. It's like they only keep a limited number in stock of the books, and then typically there's like long wait lists for those popular books. Like all of the Colleen Hoover books at my library, forget about it. You have to wait like 6 months in order to get a hold of one of those books. So when I saw that they had one of the book or 2 of the books from her that I really wanted to read, I jumped at the chance to get them. So the first one that I got was The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. And this one it takes place in the past and present, which is kind of a reoccurring theme in all of her books. Her storylines take place in the past and present. So in the past, I believe it takes place in the 1950s, and there is a boarding school called the Idlewild Hall, which is such a mouthful for me to say. So it's a boarding school for girls during that time who have different thoughts and attitudes about society during that time. They're not the girls who want to get married, cook, and clean for the rest of their lives. They want to, go out and be their own independent woman, get a career. They have different ideologies than their parents. So they're sent to this boarding school. Now, the boarding school is said to be haunted by this woman or girl, I should say, who leers you out of the house or out of the hall and she kills you. And so the story is told from four girls' perspectives, and at the end of it, well, not at the end of it, but one of the girls goes missing. So the present part of this book, the main character's name is Fiona. She is a journalist who is obsessed with her sister's death that happened 20 years prior. Her body was dumped on the grounds of Idlewild Hall, and so that's kind of what leads to this obsession with that place for her. And so when they're renovating the hall, they find a body, and so that's kind of where the story from the past and the present kind of get woven together. And so I would say this book was probably about 3.5 stars out of 5. I preferred the storyline from the past better than I did the present. I really liked hearing the story of the 4 different girls and what they went through at the boarding school. I thought that was really interesting to read about. So overall, I do recommend this book. I don't think it's as good as the Book of Cold Cases, but I don't think you would be disappointed if you read this one as well. And then the second book that I got from Simone St. James is The Sundown Motel. Now, I have seen a couple more people over on Bookstagram talking about this one, and unfortunately for me, at the beginning of this video, I did mention that there was a couple books that I was a bit more disappointed with, and this was actually one of them. So this one also takes place in the past and the present, and it obviously takes place at the Sundown Motel. And so in the past, I believe it's the late 70s, early 80s, there's a character named Viv, and she leaves home. She goes to Fells, New York, and the first place she stops is this motel. And she sees that they're hiring for an overnight clerk position, and she takes the job. So the Sundown Motel ends up being haunted, as the theme in all of Simone St. James' books. They're all paranormal fiction, so keep that in mind if you are going to pick up the book. They're not based truly in reality, I guess you could say. So while she's there, Viv meets a variety of different, sketchy people. And also while she's in town, she discovers that in the town of Fells, there has been several girls around her age who have actually been killed. And so throughout the book, she kind of goes and plays detective, and so she connects the dots between all of the murders, and she pinpoints it to one specific person who actually comes to the Sundown Motel and visits. So then the present is told 35 years later through her niece Carly's eyes, who is on a mission to find out what happened to her aunt 35 years prior, because Viv, while she's working one night, just completely disappears and vanishes. So Carly gets into town and basically goes on a mission, like I said, to find her missing aunt and what happened to her. The reason why I didn't particularly like this book, it's not that I didn't like it. I liked it. I would probably give it a 2 to maybe 2.5 stars out of 5. It's because this wasn't a book that I could pick up and then set back down and then pick it back up again, like maybe 12 hours later, and like really just fall back into it. I felt like every time I put it down and then I picked it back up, I was like, who's this character? What's that person's name again? Why are they relevant to the story? And it's not like it had too many characters in it. I didn't click well with this book, I guess. I did prefer the Viv storyline, so the past storyline, much, much more. I thought that was way more intriguing than what happens with Carly. And I think it's because Carly's storyline is the reason why I didn't like this book as much. Carly's storyline, everything was so coincidental and so convenient. It really just everything fell into place, and it really read as unbelievable to me. So as an example of what I mean, and this is not a spoiler at all. So Carly gets to town and she obviously needs some place to stay. And she goes to the place where she thinks that her Aunt Viv had been living back in the 80s. And conveniently, there is a girl who has a room for rent. And conveniently, they click and they hit it off right away. Conveniently, this girl is rich and doesn't need money from Carly. And conveniently, she's also really into the murders that had happened in Fell, and she's knows all about them and everything like that. So there's a lot of things in the book that happened, I think, just purely for convenience sake to move the story along, because she also gets a position as the overnight clerk at the Sundown Motel and kind of goes through the same thing as her Aunt Viv did. So I will say that in Carly's storyline, there's a bit of a romance element to her storyline, and I actually really did enjoy that part of the book, but that part was the only part of Carly's storyline that I actually really liked. So maybe you'll have a different opinion of the book than I did. I didn't think it was bad. I didn't think it was good. Take it or leave it, I guess, you know. Now, this other book that I picked up, also from the library, I was super excited about this one that I picked up, that I was able to find it in the first place, is The Other Miss by Mary Kubica. This book is so good. If you are into psychological thrillers, like let's say you read The Silent Patient and you really liked that one, I really feel like you're gonna really like this book. I personally really like psychological thrillers. I can typically guess the twist, the big twist at the end. I kind of know the ending before it happens. Sometimes that ruins a book for me, sometimes it doesn't. But this one, well, there is a big twist at the end. I did kind of guess it beforehand, but there's a lot of other like little twists that threw me that I did not see coming at all. And because of this, I'm giving this book a 5 out of 5. So let me tell you the synopsis about it, obviously, first. So Sadie and Will move from Chicago to Maine because Will's sister dies and she leaves her house and her daughter in the care of Will and Sadie. Sadie is the only doctor on the, I guess, the island, they call it. So they get to the house and they meet Will's niece, and she is a angsty, gothic kind of teenager. She doesn't want them to be there, especially because she doesn't want them to be there. And then also Sadie gets this weird feeling from the house because Will's sister actually did suicide upstairs in the attic. So she's already feeling really weird about the house, and then one of their neighbors dies. Her name is Morgan. So Morgan dies, well, is brutally murdered. And Sadie becomes obsessed with trying to find Morgan's killer and what happens. So that's pretty much the premise of the book. Now, the book does take place mostly from Sadie's point of view, but there are a few chapters that are told from 2 other perspectives, actually 3 other perspectives, I should say. So there's Camille's perspective, a girl named Camille, and she actually is the mistress of Will, Sadie's husband. And then there's also a storyline from a little girl, a 6-year-old's perspective, named Mouse. It's a nickname her father gave her. But so we see what happens to her, and it sounds weird, but it does all connect together. And then at the very end, we do see from Will's perspective of what's happening. And like I said, I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. 5 out of 5 stars. The twists and turns were amazing. And every chapter, it felt like there was something going on. There was always something moving. You know when you get a book and there's like a few chapters that just kind of feel like filler chapters, nothing's really happening, nothing's moving in the storyline, you're just kind of like, okay, or you're like, I wouldn't say that I connected to Sadie. I didn't really actually like her. She seemed kind of stupid for a doctor. I don't know. I expected her to be a lot smarter, but she does kind of make dumb decisions. But whereas that would bother me in other books, in this book, it moved the story along really nicely, that she made these stupid, some of these stupid decisions that you're like, why would you do that? Okay, well, whatever. Or I don't want to say what I was going to say because that'll just, I feel like, maybe spoil it for some of you, so I won't say that. But her stupidness moved the storyline along. So 100% recommend this book for sure. And the last book that I read this month, kind of completely different than the other ones, is Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. I'm sure so many of you have seen this book being recommended literally everywhere. It's all over social media, and for good cause. If you're able to get a copy of this book, please do. It's a great contemporary romance novel. It was a really fast read for me. I read it, I think, in like 2 days. I picked it up and I couldn't stop reading it. It's such like it's a cute book. It's cute. It doesn't make you think too hard. You just pick it up, read it, and you're like, oh, that was really cute. So this is another book that takes place the past and the present, and it's basically a love story about Macy and Elliot. And they met when they were younger. I believe it was like, was it 13? I think. Macy's mother dies when she's younger, and her father, in order for her to kind of escape the world, he buys a vacation home. And at that vacation home, she meets her next door neighbor, Elliot, who comes from like a huge, large, boisterous family. And they're so different from her family. You know, her nuclear family is just her and her father. And her and Elliot, they just become instantly best friends. And between the ages of 13 and 18, you see their romance blossom from childhood best friends to, and now their boyfriend and girlfriend, and they have all of their firsts together, and it's super, super sweet. And then there is something that happens and it breaks them apart, and 11 years go by. And so the other half of the book is told in the present, and 11 years have gone by, and Macy is now a pediatrics resident, and she is engaged to a different man named Sean. And one day she goes and she's having coffee with her best friend, and she runs into Elliot again, or Elliot for the first time in 11 years. And of course, you know, the story picks up from there, and it goes back and forth between the past and the present. So you kind of, you know, you get to see how they build their love, and it's so cute. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that word, the word cute, but that is the adjective that I have chosen to describe this book. Apparently, it is cute. I think the reason why I really liked this book so much is just that it really tugged on my heartstrings. It completely reminded me of me and my husband. We met when we were, 14, going on 15. I had, just like Macy, had recently lost a parent, and I became best friends with someone, my husband, and we had a high school, you know, we were high school sweethearts, and then we got married and had kids. And, you know, he really helped me out with the death of my parent. And so this book just really reminded me of my past. It was not necessarily 100% the same as what Macy and Elliot go through, as, you know, me and my husband, but there are parts of it that really I connected with. But obviously if you haven't gone through that or anything like that, I still think you will really enjoy this book. So that completes this video. These are the books that I read in the month of June. Let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books. You can also let me know what books you read this month and if you recommend them to me as well. I definitely will be checking. I love getting recommendations for books, especially if they're psychological thrillers, suspense, mystery, contemporary romance, paranormal fiction. I mean, I also really love historical fiction, so the list just goes on and on of what I'll read. So if you, like I said, if you have any recommendations for me, leave them in the comments below. I'll be sure to check them out. And if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel. I'm gonna try to put out videos every Wednesday and Friday. So yeah, I hope that you guys have a beautiful day wherever you are, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!